Just hours ago, a woman was shot and killed. And right now, St. Louis Metro Police are trying to find out what led up to this shooting. It happened on South Vanderbilt at around 5 o'clock this evening. Our 5 on Your Side crew was there as police gathered at a nearby Quick Trip where a white Ford sedan was surrounded by crime scene tape.
The white Ford sedan screeched into the Quick Trip parking lot on South Vanderbilt Avenue. Blood covered the back seat. The driver rushed inside, frantically calling for help as curious onlookers gathered. Inside the car, 36-year-old Rita Williams slumped against the window, a single gunshot wound to her head. The person who pulled the trigger wasn't a stranger or a random attacker. It was Bessie Thomas, her roommate, her confidant, her supposed best friend of many years. Welcome to our channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we dive deep into cases that reveal the darkest corners of human relationships. Today's story will shake your understanding of friendship to its core. Just moments before arriving at that gas station, these two women had been arguing in the car. Words escalated to screams. Then came the sound that changed everything. A gunshot that echoed through the vehicle, leaving 4 children without a mother and a community struggling to understand why. What could possibly drive someone to murder their longtime friend? What happens when the person who shares your home, who knows your children, who has been part of your daily life for years, suddenly becomes your killer? Rita's mother had seen her daughter just one day before the murder.
I had to go to her house and get some stuff for the kids to wear to school, and I sent 2 big old boxes of chocolate.
I had to go to her house and get some stuff for the kids to wear to school, she would later recall, her voice breaking as she described the Valentine's Day candy her daughter had bought for her, a gift that would never be personally delivered. As police secured the scene at the Quick Trip that February afternoon, they found Bessie Thomas still sitting in the front passenger seat of the blood-stained car. The gun was still there. So was the body of her friend. But the full story of what happened between these two women, the tensions that had been building, the warnings that went unheeded, and the final moments that led to that fatal shot, was just beginning to emerge. And what investigators would soon discover about their relationship would leave even veteran detectives questioning everything they thought they knew about friendship. Before she became a headline in a tragic murder case, Rita Williams was a 36-year-old mother navigating the challenges of raising 4 children in St. Louis. Born in 1988, Rita had spent her entire life in this city, a place known for its arch and blues music, but also for neighborhoods where economic hardship and violence were daily realities. Those who knew Rita described her as someone who radiated warmth, despite the obstacles life had placed in her path. Her children, ranging from 4 to 17 years old, were the center of her universe. Every decision she made, from where they lived to how she spent her limited resources, was filtered through one question: what's best for my kid? It was my only daughter. I really loved her. We talked every day, Rita's mother, Rita Collins, told reporters after the tragedy. This daily connection between mother and daughter revealed the tight-knit nature of their relationship. A bond that would make the sudden loss even more devastating for Collins. Rita's home was modest but maintained with pride. Financial stability remained an ongoing challenge, like many single parents raising multiple children in an economy where wages rarely kept pace with rising costs. This economic pressure likely influenced her decision to share housing with Bessie Thomas, splitting bills and creating a support system that, on the surface, seemed beneficial for everyone involved. The arrangement appeared practical: shared expenses, built-in childcare support, and companionship. What no one could have anticipated was how this living situation would ultimately lead to her death at the hands of the very person who shared her daily life. February 1st, 2025, wasn't meant to be remarkable. It was simply another Saturday. A day for errands, for spending time with her children, for the 1,000 small tasks that make up a mother's life. Rita had recently purchased Valentine's Day candy for her mother and aunt, a small gesture that spoke volumes about her character. Even with limited resources and 4 children to support, she thought of others. My grandson, the 13-year-old, said, "That's yours and Auntie's candy. My mama bought it for you for Valentine's Day." Collins recalled, the memory of this final gift from her daughter now imbued with heartbreaking significance. What makes Rita's story particularly poignant is how ordinary her life was until its abrupt end. She wasn't a celebrity or public figure. She was a mother trying her best, maintaining relationships, planning for holidays, and hoping to provide stability for her children. Her daily concerns were universal: bills, child care, work schedules, and household management. The day before her death, when her mother visited to get some stuff for the kids to wear to school, neither woman could have known it would be their final interaction. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no sense of foreboding, just the routine exchange between a mother and daughter who expected countless more conversations in the years ahead. Instead, within 24 hours, Rita Williams would be gone, leaving behind 4 children who would now face life without their mother, and a community struggling to comprehend how a friendship could end so violently. The relationship between Rita Williams and Bessie Thomas defied simple categorization. On paper, they were roommates, 2 women sharing living space to ease financial burdens. In practice, they had become something more complex: friends, confidants, and part of each other's extended family structure. Their connection spanned years, evolving from casual acquaintances to people who shared the intimate rhythms of daily life. At 46, Bessie was a decade older than Rita, creating a dynamic where she sometimes positioned herself as the more experienced voice in household decisions. The age gap occasionally manifested as a mentor-mentee relationship, with Bessie offering guidance based on her additional years of life experience. To outsiders, they appeared to function as a team, 2 women supporting each other through life's challenges. But beneath this seemingly functional partnership, fault lines had formed. "I told her, you argue too much. This is your house and you should run your house the way you want it," Rita's mother had warned her daughter. This statement reveals a crucial insight. The power balance within the household had shifted, with Rita potentially feeling undermined in her own home. What began as a mutually beneficial arrangement had evolved into something more complicated and ultimately dangerous. The warning from Rita's mother now carries prophetic weight. She had observed the dynamics between the 2 women and recognized something concerning enough to speak up. Like many parental warnings, it went unheeded, not out of disrespect, but because adult children often believe they understand their own relationships better than outside observers. What makes this case particularly troubling is that Bessie Thomas brought a concerning history into this living arrangement. Court records revealed that in 2007, Thomas had pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of child abuse. 5 years earlier, in 2002, she had been convicted of possessing a controlled substance. This criminal history, especially the child abuse conviction, should have raised red flags about her potential for violence, particularly in a household with 4 children. The nature of their arguments remained private until they became fatally public on February 1st. Neighbors reported hearing occasional heated exchanges, but nothing that seemed to cross the line into dangerous territory. This is often the case with domestic situations that turn violent. The escalation happens behind closed doors, with outsiders catching only glimpses of the building tension. What transformed their relationship from functional to fatal? Financial stress likely played a role. The challenges of sharing space, parenting differences, and personality conflicts all contributed to an increasingly volatile situation. Small irritations accumulated over time, creating a foundation of resentment that would eventually support a moment of deadly rage. The tragedy of Rita and Bessie's story lies partly in its ordinariness until that final moment. 2 women trying to make ends meet, sharing a home, navigating the complications of blended living arrangements until something broke irreparably between them. February 2025 began under a gray St. Louis sky. The temperature hovered just above freezing, typical Midwest winter weather that gave no hint of the violence that would unfold before sunset. For Rita Williams, it was simply Saturday, a day to run errands and manage the weekend routines of her 4 children. What we know about Rita's final hours comes primarily from police reports, witness statements, and the probable cause document filed in the aftermath. These clinical accounts piece together a timeline that ends with a mother's life cut short and a decades-long friendship shattered beyond repair. By late afternoon, Rita Williams and Bessie Thomas found themselves as passengers in a white Ford sedan. A mutual friend sat behind the wheel, navigating the streets of Midtown St. Louis. Rita occupied the back seat while Bessie sat in front. This ordinary arrangement, 3 friends in a car, would soon become the setting for an extraordinary act of violence. As the car traveled through the 3900 block of Chateau Avenue, conversation between Rita and Bessie shifted from casual to confrontational. According to the probable cause statement, what began as a discussion escalated rapidly. Voices raised. The confined space of the vehicle amplified every word, creating an emotional pressure cooker with no escape valve. Thomas and her longtime friend Rita Williams began screaming at each other before their disagreement turned physical, the police report stated with stark simplicity. The driver, caught between 2 arguing friends, continued navigating traffic while attempting to defuse the situation. What exactly triggered this particular argument remains undisclosed in public records, but the intensity suggests it tapped into long-standing tensions rather than a momentary disagreement. Then, at approximately 4:55 p.m., the unthinkable happened. Bessie Thomas, seated in the front passenger seat, produced a firearm, a gun she was legally prohibited from possessing due to her prior felony convictions. In a moment that would forever alter multiple lives, she turned and fired a single shot. The bullet struck Rita Williams in the head. The driver, now witness to a homicide, made a split-second decision that speaks to the chaos of the moment. Rather than stopping immediately, she drove directly to a nearby quick-trip gas station at the intersection of South Van Deventer and Chateau Avenues. Perhaps she hoped emergency medical personnel could save Rita's life. Perhaps shock prevented clear thinking. Whatever the motivation, this decision transformed a routine gas station into a crime scene. By the time police arrived, a crowd had gathered. Officers quickly taped off a large section of the parking lot, their attention focused on the white Ford sedan where Rita Williams lay mortally wounded. Despite immediate medical attention, authorities pronounced her dead at approximately 6 p.m., just over an hour after the shooting. The quick-trip surveillance cameras captured the vehicle's arrival, the driver's frantic exit, and the subsequent response from emergency personnel. These silent witnesses recorded the aftermath of a friendship that had deteriorated to its deadly conclusion. Bessie Thomas remained in the front passenger seat when police arrived. According to officers at the scene, she appeared almost stunned by her own actions. The murder weapon was still in her possession, physical evidence that would make denying her involvement impossible. The victim did not have a gun or any other weapon, the charging documents would later specify, emphasizing the one-sided nature of the violence. This wasn't self-defense or mutual combat. It was, in the eyes of the law, first-degree murder. As night fell over St. Louis, 4 children waited for a mother who would never return home. Rita Collins received the phone call that every parent dreads, and Bessie Thomas began her first night in custody, facing charges that could keep her imprisoned for the remainder of her life. The white Ford sedan, now evidence in a homicide investigation, was towed from the Quick Trip parking lot. A mundane vehicle transformed into a mobile crime scene by a single moment of rage that ended a friendship in the most permanent way possible. The St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's homicide unit moved with practiced efficiency. Within hours of Rita Williams' death, they had secured statements from the driver and other witnesses, processed the crime scene at the Quick Trip, and taken Bessie Thomas into custody. The case, despite its emotional complexity, presented straightforward evidence from an investigative standpoint. By Monday morning, just 2 days after the shooting, the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office had filed a slate of serious charges against Thomas: first-degree murder, armed criminal action, and unlawful possession of a firearm. The charging documents painted a clear picture of premeditation, not in the sense of a long-planned assassination, but in the legal understanding that Thomas had sufficient time, even if just moments, to consider her actions before pulling the trigger. The defendant was sitting in the car's front passenger seat. Her friend was sitting in the car's back seat, the probable cause statement noted with clinical precision. This positioning proved significant to investigators. The physical act of turning to face someone in the back seat requires deliberate movement, a moment when Thomas could have chosen differently. The unlawful possession charge stemmed from Thomas's previous felony convictions. Under Missouri law, as in most states, convicted felons are prohibited from possessing firearms. Thomas's 2002 drug conviction and 2007 child abuse convictions had stripped her of gun ownership rights she had clearly disregarded. If you've been following this case closely, now would be a good time to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed a friendship deteriorate, though hopefully not to this extreme? Your experiences might help others recognize warning signs in their own relationship. The evidence against Thomas mounted quickly. Ballistics tests confirmed the recovered weapon as the murder instrument. Gunshot residue on Thomas's hands and clothing provided further proof she had fired the fatal shot. The driver's testimony, coupled with statements from witnesses at the Quick Trip, created a timeline that left little room for alternative explanations. Thomas was held without bond at the St. Louis City Justice Center, a reflection of both the severity of the charges and her prior criminal history. The judge deemed her a flight risk and potential danger to the community, ensuring she would remain behind bars throughout the legal proceeding. For investigators, the case represented a tragically common scenario: interpersonal violence between people who knew each other well. What made it unusual wasn't the circumstances, but the setting: a moving vehicle with a witness present, and the complete transformation of a years-long friendship into a homicide in a matter of moments. The day before the shooting, January 31st, was the last time Collins saw her daughter alive. There was nothing remarkable about this visit, no tearful goodbyes or premonitions of disaster. Just a mother and daughter engaged in the ordinary business of family life. This ordinariness makes the loss all the more jarring. There was no preparation, no chance to say the things that matter most when you know the end is near. It was like I lost my whole world, Collins told reporters, the raw grief evident in her expression. It was my only daughter. I really loved her. We talked every day. What compounds the tragedy for Collins is that she had sensed trouble brewing between her daughter and Bessie Thomas. With a mother's intuition, she had recognized the unhealthy dynamics developing in the shared household. Now, instead of planning her daughter's future, Collins found herself planning a funeral. Instead of watching her grandchildren grow up with their mother's guidance, she faced the prospect of raising them herself. At an age when many people look forward to the relative freedom of grandparenthood, Collins inherited the full-time responsibility of parenting 4 traumatized children. The Valentine's candy sits unopened on her dresser, a bittersweet reminder of her daughter's thoughtfulness and the celebration they would never share. For Collins, this small gift represents both the depth of her loss and the enduring connection that even death cannot sever. 4 pairs of eyes looked up at Rita Collins as she tried to explain why their mother wouldn't be coming home. The youngest, just 4 years old, couldn't grasp the permanence of death, repeatedly asking when Mommy would return. The oldest, at 17, understood all too well, her face hardening with grief and anger as the reality sank in. These 4 children, ages 4, 8, 13, and 17, became the living legacy of Rita Williams and the most profound victims of the violence that took their mother. In an instant, they lost not only their primary caregiver, but also their sense of security and normalcy. The trajectory of their lives altered irrevocably by a single bullet fired during an argument. "They ask about their mom every day," Collins shared, her voice breaking slightly. The questions varied by age. The younger ones wanted to know when their mother would return, while the teenagers grappled with the how and why of her violent death. Explaining that their mother's longtime friend and roommate had pulled the trigger added layers of confusion and betrayal to their grief. The practical challenges emerged immediately. The children needed to be relocated to their grandmother's home, switching schools mid-year and adjusting to new routines while processing their trauma. Clothes, toys, school supplies, the mundane necessities of childhood had to be gathered from the home they had shared with their mother and Bessie Thomas, now a crime scene tainted by violence. Financial pressures mounted quickly. Rita Collins, already living on a fixed income, suddenly needed to provide for 4 additional people. The costs of the funeral, combined with the ongoing expenses of raising children, created an economic burden that threatened to overwhelm the family's resources. Recognizing these challenges, the community mobilized. A GoFundMe campaign was established to help with immediate expenses. "The funds will help support Rita's 4 children ages 4 to 17, the campaign stated simply. Local organizations offered counseling services, understanding that the psychological impact of losing a parent to homicide creates unique trauma that requires specialized intervention. For the children, particularly the younger ones, comprehending their mother's absence remained an ongoing struggle. Birthdays, holidays, school events, each milestone would now be marked by her absence. The 13-year-old, who had proudly told his grandmother about the Valentine's candy his mother had purchased, would face that holiday without her. The sweet gesture transformed into a painful reminder of loss. As Rita Collins stepped into the role of primary caregiver, she faced the daunting task of helping these children navigate their grief while processing her own. Together, they formed a new family unit bonded by love for Rita Williams and the shared experience of surviving her loss. What transforms a years-long friendship into a moment of deadly violence? This question haunts not only Rita Williams' family, but also investigators, mental health professionals, and anyone who has witnessed the deterioration of a once solid relationship. The confined space of the vehicle likely played a crucial role in the fatal escalation. Dr. James Knoll, a forensic psychiatrist who studies interpersonal violence, though not involved in this specific case, explains that cars create unique psychological pressure cookers. When conflict erupts in a vehicle, there's literally nowhere to go, he notes. The physical containment can intensify emotional reactions, eliminating the option to walk away and cool down. This spatial constraint, combined with a history of tension between Rita and Bessie, created the conditions for violence. But the presence of a firearm, a gun Bessie Thomas was legally prohibited from possessing, transformed what might have been a heated argument into a homicide. The relationship between these women contained warning signs that, in retrospect, appear obvious. Their arguments had increased in frequency and intensity. Rita's mother had noticed the power struggle in the household, warning her daughter about the unhealthy dynamic. Bessie's criminal history included violent behavior as evidenced by her child abuse conviction. Yet these red flags went unaddressed, a common pattern in relationships that eventually turn violent. People often normalize escalating conflict, particularly when it develops gradually over time. The frog in boiling water analogy applies. Changes that occur incrementally often go unnoticed until reaching a critical point. Financial interdependence likely complicated matters. Sharing housing creates practical barriers to separation, even when relationships become strained. For Rita, a single mother of 4, the economic benefits of a roommate arrangement may have outweighed the growing interpersonal costs. Until that calculation proved fatally wrong, what makes this case particularly disturbing is how it challenges our assumptions about friendship. We expect romantic relationships to sometimes turn violent. Domestic violence statistics bear this out, but we rarely anticipate lethal violence between friends, especially female friends. This expectation gap can prevent people from recognizing danger in non-romantic relationships until it's too late. As we examine the final section of Rita Williams' story, one question remains. Could anyone have prevented this tragedy? The murder of Rita Williams represents more than just another statistic in St. Louis's crime ledger. It stands as a stark reminder that violence often emerges from the relationships we believe are safe, the people we invite into our homes, trust with our children, and share our daily lives with. As Rita's 4 children adjust to life without their mother, and as Rita Collins navigates the challenges of raising her grandchildren while processing her own grief, several crucial lessons emerge from this tragedy. First, prior violent behavior remains one of the strongest predictors of future violence. Bessie Thomas's 2007 conviction for child abuse wasn't simply a past mistake, it was a warning sign that went unheeded. When someone demonstrates the capacity for violence, particularly against vulnerable individuals like children, that potential rarely disappears without significant intervention. Second, arguments that escalate to screaming matches rarely de-escalate on their own. The pattern of increasing conflict between Rita and Bessie had become normalized, with household members adapting to the tension rather than addressing its root causes. This normalization of conflict creates environments where violence becomes increasingly possible. Third, access to firearms by individuals with violent histories dramatically increases the risk of fatal outcomes. Bessie Thomas was legally prohibited from possessing a gun due to her felony convictions, yet she obtained one anyway, a failure of enforcement that had deadly consequences. For those watching who recognize similar warning signs in their own relationships or living situations, please consider this a call to action. Resources exist in every community for conflict resolution, emergency housing, and crisis intervention. The time to seek help is before violence occurs, not after. What warning signs have you noticed in relationships around you? Have you ever had to intervene when a friendship seemed to be turning toxic? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your insight might help someone else recognize a dangerous situation before it's too late. The Valentine's candy Rita Williams purchased for her mother now sits as a bittersweet memorial, a reminder that life can change in an instant and that the people closest to us hold both our greatest joys and our deepest vulnerabilities.